A single wooden bucket sat inside the city of Modena for nearly 700 years. Tourists looked at it. Historians talked about it. Locals proudly displayed it. And according to legend, that ordinary bucket was the reason thousands of medieval soldiers marched into battle. It sounds ridiculous. A war over a bucket. But in northern Italy during the year 1325, the bucket was never really the point. The real story was about power, revenge, politics, and two rival cities that hated each other so much they were willing to fight over almost anything. To understand how a simple wooden bucket became one of history's strangest symbols, we need to travel back to medieval Italy. At the time, Italy was not a unified country. Instead, it was a patchwork of independent city-states competing for wealth, influence, and survival. Powerful cities built walls, raised armies, and formed alliances. Rivalries could last generations. Among the most bitter enemies were Bologna and Modena. The two cities sat less than 30 miles apart, but politically, they belonged to opposite sides of a much larger struggle that divided Europe. Bologna largely supported the Guelphs, who backed the Pope. Modena generally supported the Ghibellines, who backed the Holy Roman Emperor. This conflict stretched far beyond local politics. Families, merchants, nobles, and entire cities chose sides. Loyalty could determine careers, wealth, and even survival. Over time, political disagreement hardened into deep hatred. For decades, raids, border disputes, and military clashes erupted between the two cities. Farmers living near the frontier often paid the price. Fields were burned. Livestock was stolen. Villages were attacked. Each side believed the other was the aggressor. Then the tensions began escalating even further. By the early 1300s, Bologna had become one of the largest and wealthiest cities in Europe. Its population may have exceeded 50,000 people. Massive walls protected the city. Merchants grew rich from trade. Students traveled from across the continent to study at the famous university. Modena was smaller, but it was far from weak. Its leaders built strong alliances and maintained a capable military force. More importantly, they were determined not to be dominated by their larger neighbor. The situation became increasingly dangerous as both sides launched raids across the border. Every attack demanded retaliation. Every retaliation demanded revenge. The cycle fed itself. Then came the event that history would remember. According to the famous story, a group of Modenese soldiers successfully raided Bologna and returned home carrying an unusual trophy, a wooden bucket. The bucket had reportedly been taken from a public well inside Bologna. To modern ears, stealing a bucket sounds like a childish prank. But in medieval politics, symbols mattered. Humiliation mattered. Public embarrassment mattered. And the theft became a powerful insult. The citizens of Bologna demanded its return. Modena refused. Whether the bucket directly triggered the conflict or simply became a symbol of an already explosive situation remains debated by historians. What is certain is that tensions were reaching a breaking point. Soon, both cities were preparing for war. What followed was not a minor skirmish. It was one of the largest battles fought between Italian city-states during the Middle Ages. In November of 1325, armies gathered near the town of Zappolino. Thousands of soldiers marched beneath banners displaying the colors of their cities. Knights prepared armor. Crossbowmen checked their weapons. Horses stamped nervously in the cold air. The battlefield stretched across rolling hills and farmland. Bologna assembled a larger force, reportedly numbering around 30,000 men. Modena's army was significantly smaller, but numbers do not always decide battles. As the armies collided, chaos spread across the countryside. Crossbow bolts filled the air. Cavalry charges slammed into infantry formations. Soldiers fought in clouds of dust, confusion, and noise. Medieval battles were terrifying experiences. Visibility disappeared. Orders became difficult to hear. Individual courage mattered, but discipline often mattered more. Despite being outnumbered, Modena gained the advantage. Its forces exploited weaknesses in Bologna's formations and steadily pushed the larger army backward. Then the battle began turning into a rout. As panic spread, portions of Bologna's army broke and fled. The retreat accelerated. What had begun as a contest between rivals was becoming a decisive victory. By the end of the fighting, Modena had won. The outcome shocked many observers. The smaller city had defeated one of the most powerful urban centers in northern Italy, but the humiliation was not over. Victorious Modenese forces reportedly pushed toward Bologna itself. Although they did not capture the city, they demonstrated their dominance in dramatic fashion, and according to tradition, they returned home with their famous prize, the bucket. Over time, the object became inseparable from the story. Generations remembered the war not through political arguments or military strategies, but through the image of a wooden bucket standing at the center of an international feud. The symbol was simply too memorable. Yet focusing only on the bucket hides the real lesson. This was never truly a conflict about household equipment. The bucket represented something much larger. It represented decades of rivalry. It represented political division. It represented wounded pride. It represented competing visions of power. The same forces that fueled the conflict between Bologna and Modena have appeared throughout history. Nations have gone to war over border incidents. Empires have fought over symbols. Political tensions have exploded after seemingly small events. When pressure builds for long enough, even minor incidents can become sparks. The bucket was the spark, the rivalry was the fuel, and the result was war. Today, visitors to Modena can still see the famous bucket preserved as a historical artifact. Whether it was the exact original bucket or a later replacement has become part of the legend. What matters is what it represents. An ordinary object transformed into one of history's most famous symbols of rivalry. A reminder that conflicts rarely begin because of the thing people remember. They begin because years of anger, fear, competition, and pride have already prepared the ground. The bucket merely gave history a story to tell. And that story survived for centuries. Because while countless medieval battles have been forgotten, very few can claim something extraordinary. Very few can say they became known as the war that started over a bucket.